I'm Martin Boakes. I'm Director at EAS, Endpoint Automation Services. As Raj mentioned, we've been working with Druid for a number of years now. But really importantly today, it's about Richard and around Optegra. So you don't want to hear from me. We have got a couple of slides, and we'll click them on in a moment. Can you just see us? Yeah, sorry about the photos. You have to bear with us.
Let's move on very quickly from those, shall we? Let's change those.
Let's try and see if I can do that. No. No, you're stuck with us. Sorry about that. But before we start, why don't I just ask Richard to introduce himself and also, more importantly, Optegra and what they do, because that's really important.
Perfect, Martin. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, as Martin touched on, as Raj said, we've Optegra. We're a private eye care hospital. We're a pan-European business, so we're based across 4 countries in UK, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Poland. We operate out of 70 locations, 25 in the UK, and you do the maths on the rest of Europe. Primarily, we deal in cataract, and in the UK, we're one of the biggest providers of NHS cataract surgery in the market. NHS cataract surgery is a heavily outsourced proposition, so we're very pleased to be able to partner with the NHS to deliver care for tens of thousands of patients every year. But of course, with those number of patients comes some challenges about how you cope with NHS volumes on demand, but also NHS cost pressures on price. And I think that's where we came across Druid and the AI technology that can help us leverage some of those opportunities to better serve our patients. And that's the key piece here is we're in healthcare, right? So patients number one, and that's really important for us. So when we're choosing a partner, it's important to make sure we have the right partner for our patients, not just for our business.
And actually, Richard, on that, how did you then make that leap to start? Because there's a good use case, but what made you consider it in the first place?
So the first thing we did was I sat in this room. So I sat here a year ago, I think 3rd row back, waiting for lunch at about this sort of time as well, so the timings haven't changed. But that was actually stage 2 of the journey. Stage 1 was we spoke to a number of the providers as well. But the use case, to your point, Martin, is we, as a business, pre-pandemic, delivered about 3,000 procedures, cataract procedures. I won't go into too many specifics. This year we'll do 50,000, right? That's a huge growth in 4 years. We spent a lot of our time in those first 2 or 3 years looking at how we improve the in-hospital patient experience and standardise that patient pathway. But of course, with all those surgeries comes a lot of administration burden. So we wanted to understand how can we better support our back office staff, as well as our in-hospital clinicians, to use technology, but I'm not a technologist, by the way. The title is NHS Director. I'm a generalist around NHS. I'm not a technology expert, but we recognise an opportunity to better use technology to help deal with that huge volume of patients that we're experiencing, and to make it a better experience for them as well as for our staff.
So, perfect use case, obviously. You're sat here 3rd row back 12 months ago. And how did the board and the teams accept this idea? And who did it come from? Obviously, you're sat here, you took it back. Tell us a bit more about that, if that's okay.
So, I'll answer the first question because I didn't quite finish it, because the use case is one thing. Specifically, what are we trying to do, right? So what do we want to do with this technology initially? Raj mentioned it. We want to look at how we can automate our preoperative assessments. We do 50,000 surgeries. Initially, we're looking at, okay, those patients normally need to have a face-to-face appointment with a clinician. Pre-pandemic, a lot of things moved to telephony anyway, so we started to use remote appointments for patients. But we wanted to use the technology to try and automate as many of those appointments as possible. So we're talking about pre-operatively, can we check the medical suitability of our patients? And post-operatively, can we check the surgery went okay? Historically, and even to date in the NHS, these are primarily face-to-face appointments, taking up valuable clinical time and causing for patients to travel quite a long way for those appointments. It's not a great experience for patients, and it's very costly for the NHS as well. So the second question, which I'll now answer. How are our board? They were ecstatic that we chose Druid as a partner. So actually Druid crossed our desk because our investor has got a portfolio company in, I'm going to get the wrong country, but let's go somewhere over in Eastern Europe, Regina Maria, who'd been using Druid for a number of years. So they were ecstatic and really quite evangelical about using technology to help support our patients because they'd seen the real world benefit within that portfolio business.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure there's a number of people in the room that are sat here today that have got an investor or a board that are just saying, we just need AI. I've read about it in the news, I've seen it somewhere. Someone says it's a really good thing, so we must have it. I don't care what we're going to use it for yet, but we need it. But actually, you guys had a really, really good case, a really strong case, and the board backing you to do that. So it's a great starting point.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to others in the room about that, getting on board and getting the board to believe in you? Because they see the news, but also, there's two parts to it, obviously, with the question. The users.
The users was the toughest bit, and I know this morning, by the way, you've all probably been bamboozled with data. We're not here to talk about data. We're here to talk about the actual lived experience. And the biggest challenge was and remains getting your staff to embrace this sort of technological change. Healthcare is notoriously, and rightly so, cautious, risk-averse, moves slowly. So we were trying to put this scary new technology in front of our patients and in front of our nurses, and there was a lot of resistance. And I'll be honest, there remains some resistance as well, actually. And I'm sure Martin, you'll ask the question later, but I'll answer it now, is the thing we should have done differently was communicate better, probably, with them. So I think that's my recommendation to anybody who's looking to put this technology in, or any platform like this, will be think about the end user, actually, who's going to be touching that technology every day. Because the board love it, because you put this fancy new platform in front of them, you put the pound, shilling and pence sort of benefit on the bit of paper, but actually the user in the middle needs to really get on board with it.
Yeah, it's always the case, isn't it? It's that adoption. So, and actually that's a great segue into the next question, really. How did you start? Where did you start? And what were the results?
Yeah, so I sort of touched upon it a moment ago, but I think it was a real journey that we went on. So the patients, as I said, historically would come into a hospital having a face-to-face appointment. We then moved that to be a telephony appointment with a healthcare technician, and we then moved it through to Druid. So the goal was to see how we can initially reduce the amount of time the patient spends in the hospital, and then subsequently look at how we can reduce the amount of time they spend after their procedure being treated as well. But we had to take very cautious steps, I think, to find the right partner with this, because there were a number of other companies we'd spoken to who could offer something similar. I think the advantage with Druid, and certainly then working with Martin and the team EAS, who we chose as our partner on this, was the speed of execution. Yeah. So for us, the start was to get started. Like, we knew what we wanted to achieve. We didn't really have a clue how to get there, but we thought, well, let's choose the people that can help us on that journey and kind of build as we go. We didn't waste 12, 18, 24 months working up the most beautiful business case, thinking through all the challenges and problems. We're a company that likes to move quite fast, and I think the partnering with Druid and EAS gave us the chance to do that. Build as you go, break things along the way. Things have gone wrong, as they naturally will. But as I was just telling Martin a moment ago, in spite of all those challenges, we've had 0 patient complications as a result of using this platform. So yes, there's been some issues and some problems, but our patient safety has always been paramount, which is fantastic.
I mean, that's a brilliant point, isn't it? That the fear and uncertainty and the excitement, that mix, that heady mix that's between the board and the users and the nursing staff, you put all of that together, but actually the results speak for themselves. 0 patient impact. That's brilliant in terms of any risk. So we should take that as a really good positive step forward. And what are the results that you're seeing now? That's a really key one for us.
Yeah, so where are we on our journey now? So yeah, a year ago today, we decided, this is a company we want to work with. I think we sort of signed our terms Jan, Feb this year, so we're 8-9 months into the journey. So we're in phase 1 of what is going to be a multi-phase, multi-year program of work. Phase 1, which is this sort of pre and post-surgery piece. So some headline statistics. So pre-surgery, we would normally see about 50,000 people for this appointment, face-to-face. A quarter of those appointments now delivered completely autonomously with no human intervention through Druid platform. So that's a significant saving of clinical time. 25%, is it where we want to be? No. We have aspirations of being near the 80% mark, but what a great place to start. On the post-op end, so when patients have been checked up on after surgery, we have about 60% of all of those patients going through a humanless interaction with Druid for their post-op assessment. So these are tens of thousands of clinical hours that are saved as a result of doing this. You can, of course, look at what that equates to in terms of your P&L and your bottom line, etc. But clinical staff are hard to find. They're not 10 a penny. NHS is flooded with vacancies for clinical staff. So we want to make sure that the ones that we do find, that we train really well, can spend their time with the patients that need that time. So we're not removing human contact. We're using the technology to make sure that those routine interactions with our customers or our patients are taken care of to allow the clinicians more time to spend with the patients that need it as well.
It's just, that's a perfect, I wish we could have just written all of that down because it's a perfect quote to be using, right? In terms of the perception now of the board and the nursing stuff, you mentioned, and we touched on it quite a lot on this, we said we wouldn't talk about data or KPIs. The fact that we can measure everything, the fact that we've got the statistics is brilliant, but actually it's about the people in the business, right? And the impact. We've seen that it's made a positive impact on them. How have they changed their view of the technology?
I mean, the board were waxing lyrical from day one, so that's not changed. They want us to move to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 quicker. When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? Which is great. To have that sort of positive support from your board is brilliant. It's the people on the shop floor. We've still got a bit of work to do, I think, to continue that engagement program with the people on the shop floor. There's still some nervousness about its efficacy in certain areas. And one of our evolutions of the platform will be to use Druid. And we call it Iris, by the way. So we've named ours. I think the gentleman earlier was speaking about, we name these things. It gives them a human kind of sort of context, right? So Iris will soon deal with inbound calls from patients with post-operative clinical queries. Okay, so think about that, right? So you've had a surgery, does it goes well 99% of the time, okay? But if something doesn't go quite well, you want to phone up and speak to somebody. We're going to put a bot in place of that person. That makes people very, very nervous.
Yeah.
And maybe rightly so. So we have to prove the success of our phase 1, phase 2, get that buy-in, get that belief in what this can do, and then we can really move on to the slightly more complex stuff. Not that this isn't complex, but the slightly more complex clinical stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's brilliant to be actually taking them on the journey as you go through that and seeing that positive step. So I've got to ask the question. Obviously, there's loads of people in the audience. You were there this time last year. You've had this rapid rate and impact into the business. It's been really positive. What advice would you give to? You've already mentioned communication, right? Yeah. But anybody else that sat here today thinking, how do I get started? Where do I go with this? It sounds exciting. I believe in it. We've seen the examples here today. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think so. Some of those lessons learned I probably touched on. I think there is a piece around engaging the people. I think IT projects, it's not an IT project, it's a human project, it's a people project. You've got to get them on board and get them with you. And we could have and should have done better there. It's quite resource intensive, so as great as Martin's team is at EAS, we've still got to put a bit of our own kind of blood, sweat and tears into it, so resource appropriately. These things take a lot of time and can conflict with BAU, which is never a good look. But I think the third thing, lesson learned on a positive basis, just get started. We were talking to suppliers for 12 months about an option to deploy this technology. Within 10 months, we've deployed this technology with Druid, and we're now, well on that journey. So I think it's just actually just getting that ball rolling, because nothing's going to be perfect from day one. But you can, working with the right people, you can work through these challenges, and you can get to the end solution, I think, a lot quicker.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. I've got loads of other questions. I'm watching time because it's ticking on there. And I did say that we were in between you and lunch. So we'll wrap up. Richard, I think you're sticking around for a while, at least for lunch.
Yes.
As will I. So if you want to come and ask us questions, please do. Happy to help and happy to share our story as well. But with that, I will exit stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers.